I didn't used to notice the wall. It was just there, part of the house, something to wipe fingerprints off or lean photos against. But one morning I found my palm pressed flat to it, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. I was halfway to the kitchen barefoot, the hallway cool beneath me when I swayed. Not dramatically, just enough to make the world tilt slightly, to make my fingers reach out on instinct. And when they touched the wall, I left them there. I remember thinking, so this is what it feels like. The thing no one prepares you for, not wrinkles, not gray hairs, not even the quiet. But this, the first time your own body humbles you. It was still early. The kettle hadn't boiled. The house was silent, full of the kind of morning light that shows every dust speck, floating like lazy snow. I had only meant to get a tea bag, but there I stood, hand pressed to plaster, afraid to take another step. I hadn't fallen. That's the important part. I hadn't fallen. But I also hadn't kept walking. That was new. That was the part that stayed with me all day, more than the toast, more than the ache behind my knees. It was that single moment of reaching out and realizing I needed support. And it wasn't emotional. It wasn't some grand metaphor. It was practical. I physically needed something to hold me up. I used to carry babies on these hips, twist grocery bags around each arm like it was nothing. I used to walk fast, always a purpose, always a list in my hand, or a meal to get to, or a child to pick up. Back then, if I stopped in the hallway, it was to answer a knock or wipe a runny nose, not to catch my breath. That day I sat down at the kitchen table and cried into my tea. Not because of the pain, though yes, it hurt. My joints burned in places that didn't even exist on anatomy charts. But it wasn't the pain. It was the realization. I had been moving a little slower for months now, but this was the first time it felt real, undeniable. And no one saw it. Not one soul. My kids didn't call that day. My neighbor didn't wave. The silence that followed my little moment in the hallway was louder than any scream. I remember thinking I could vanish right now and no one would notice until next Thursday. I didn't blame them, not really. People are busy. Life rushes forward like it's late for something. But I wished God how I wished someone had been there. Not even to help, just to see, just to notice that I was holding on to the wall like a woman twice my age. I would have accepted even a joke, a teasing laugh. Anything would have been better than invisibility. Later, when the light shifted and afternoon shadows stretched across the floor, I stood again. This time I didn't touch the wall. I stood straight and stubborn like a child refusing a hand. I made it to the sink, ran warm water over a plate, wiped crumbs from the counter. I did all the things I always do. Because that's what we do, isn't it? We continue, we perform, we push through. But the wall stayed in my mind. That stretch of painted plaster became a symbol, though no one else would ever know it. Every time I passed it that day, I saw my hand again, pale against pale, trembling just slightly, not dramatic, but different. And that's the thing about aging. It's not the loud moments that break you. It's the quiet ones. The ones where you look around and realize you are no longer who you were. And no one warned you it would feel this lonely. I was the strong one. I don't say that with pride, not anymore. Not because it wasn't true, it was, but because being the strong one is lonely. People think strength is a blessing, but really, it's a disguise. The kind of mask that doesn't come off until your hands start shaking, until your body whispers the truth your mouth never dared to say. I carried everyone for years, held the family together with nothing but willpower and muscle memory. When things broke, I fixed them. When someone cried, I wiped their tears and pretended I didn't have any of my own. I was the steady one, the dependable one, the one they all leaned on, and now I lean on the wall. There's a cruel symmetry to that. When I look back, I see all the versions of myself, the younger woman who balanced everything, who juggled chaos without dropping a single ball. There was no applause, of course. No standing ovations for dinners, cooked bills paid on time, or clothes folded while everyone else slept. Just a quiet assumption that I could handle it, that I always would. Maybe that's why no one asks if I'm okay now. They still think I'm strong. But strength fades slowly and secretly, and by the time anyone notices, it's already gone. I remember carrying my child on one hip while stirring soup with the other hand. My arms were tired, but they never gave out. I didn't get sick, not really. I didn't complain. I didn't rest. It was as if my body knew I didn't have permission to stop. Back then, I'd park in the furthest spot at the grocery store without a second thought. I'd unload 20 bags and one-trip keys in my mouth purse on my shoulder. Now I watch the neighbor's daughter carry a single tote and wince, knowing I couldn't do the same without leaning against a car for balance. That's the betrayal, I think, not just of the body, but of the memory. My hands still remember how to hold a child. My legs remember how to run to the door when someone's crying. But the muscles no longer obey. The strength is gone, but the instinct remains. That's what hurts. You remember how to be who you were, but your body won't let you. And yet no one sees that loss. When people visit, if they visit, they see me sitting. They see rest. What they don't see is what it took to get to that chair. The effort, the pauses between steps, the soft grunt as I lower myself slowly, trying not to let them hear my knees complain. They sip their coffee and talk about their day, their kids, their problems. And I listen nodding, because that's what strong women do. We listen, we absorb, we stay quiet about our own pain, so no one has to carry it with us. Sometimes I wonder if I made a mistake, not just in being strong, but in being silent about it. I never told them when it got hard. I never asked for help when the days felt too long and my back too sore. I thought I was doing the right thing, protecting them, shielding them from my exhaustion. But what I really did was teach them that I didn't need anyone, and now they believe me. There was one day not too long ago when I dropped a bowl. Nothing fancy, just an old ceramic mixing bowl I'd had for decades. It slipped right through my fingers, shattered on the kitchen tile. The sound echoed through the house like a warning bell. I stood there staring at the shards, and I thought that used to be me. Whole, useful. And now I'm just something they step around, something too fragile to trust with weight. I knelt slowly, too slowly to clean it up, each piece sharp and familiar. And for a moment I imagined just leaving it there, letting the mess stay, letting someone else notice and take care of it. But no one would. So I picked up every piece, cutting my finger on the smallest one. A tiny red bead bloomed at the tip, and I watched it, as if it belonged to someone else. Then I rinsed it under the faucet and kept cleaning. That's the thing about being the strong one. Even when you break, you still try to sweep yourself up before anyone sees. The grocery cart used to be an extension of my body. I pushed it like a chariot, filled it with everything a household needed: apples, shampoo, cereal, crayons, bandages, dreams. I could maneuver it with one hand while holding a baby in the other, mentally calculating prices, checking expiration dates, planning dinners that would stretch across tight budgets. The cart rolled easily, then my legs were firm, my back straight. I didn't think twice about how many aisles I walked or how long I stood in line. I was the engine. I fueled our home with those weekly trips. Now even the thought of standing in a checkout line makes my knees ache before I've left the house. It snuck up on me the way exhaustion used to wait for bedtime, but now arrives with the first spoonful of breakfast. I don't shop like I used to. I haven't pushed a full cart in years. These days I walk slowly down the small store near my house with a cane in one hand and a shallow basket in the other. Sometimes I pretend to compare prices, but really I'm just catching my breath. There's no rush now. No one is waiting at home. No small voices calling out for snacks or help with homework. I walk through the same aisles I once rushed through, and they've never felt so long, so unforgiving. I saw a young mother the other day juggling a toddler and a shopping list. Her cart was brimming. I watched her pick up a dropped toy without missing a beat, whispering something that made her child laugh. I remembered that version of myself, not in envy, but in mourning. She was doing what I once did, likely unaware of the strength she was spending, strength she thinks will last forever. I wanted to tell her, "You're burning fuel you can't replace," but I didn't say anything. I just smiled and looked away before she could see the tears forming. There's a weight that stays with you when you've spent your life providing. I used to know what every family member liked down to the brand of peanut butter. I shopped with their voices in my head. Don't forget the purple juice. Get the crunchy one, not smooth. Is there more oatmeal? And now, no one asks. No one texts. Sometimes I stand in front of the soup section and realize I don't even know what I want. I was so full of everyone else's needs that I forgot to have my own. One time I saw my son at the big supermarket. He didn't see me. He was with his wife laughing about something in the produce section. I stood behind a display of canned tomatoes and watched him for a full 5 minutes. I didn't call out. I don't even know why. Maybe I didn't want to interrupt their rhythm. Maybe I didn't want to see the flicker of guilt on his face when he realized how long it had been since he visited. Maybe I just wanted to pretend for a moment that I was a stranger free of history, free of expectations. When I finally walked past them, I kept my head down. My cart was nearly empty. Just bread, tea, a small jar of jam. I could feel my body trembling slightly, not from emotion, but from fatigue. Pushing even a half-full cart felt like dragging a sled through snow. He didn't notice. They turned the corner, still laughing, and I stood there for a moment, bracing myself against the cart like it was a walker. I missed the purpose I used to have, the way every item I bought had a face attached to it. A child who needed it, a husband who expected it, a guest I wanted to feed. Now I buy out of habit. I stock a pantry no one opens. I line up cans and boxes like soldiers in a forgotten war. Sometimes I run my fingers over the handle of my old grocery cart in the garage. It's rusted now, unused. We used to take it to the farmer's market. Remember, it squeaked on one wheel. The kids would hang off the side giggling. I pushed it with pride. That handle was once warm from my grip. Now it's cold, untouched, like so many things in this house. I still go to the store even when I don't need much. Not because I'm hungry, but because movement still feels like proof of life. I touch the items on the shelves. I nod at the cashier. I come home with small things I don't really need: a new sponge, a bar of soap, a magazine I won't read, just to feel like I'm still part of the world. But the walk from the parking lot is longer now, and the cart is heavier, and the store is colder, and I am quieter, more careful. Not because I want to be, but because I have to be. My body insists, and so I obey. There was a time when kneeling came as naturally as breathing. I could get down on the floor to tie a shoelace, pick up a toy wipe, a little chin smeared with jelly, and spring back up without a second thought. The knees didn't crack. The spine didn't groan. I was fluid, strong, quick. I remember so vividly kneeling before my daughter, slipping tiny socks onto her feet while she wriggled and giggled, little feet soft and pink, kicking with life. I'd kiss her toes and make silly noises, and she'd laugh like the world had no sharp edges. Back then, I didn't know those small tasks would one day become relics of a different body, a different me. Now I sit on the edge of the bed and stare at my own feet. They're swollen more days than not. The skin is thinner, the nails harder to reach. Some mornings I struggle to get a sock over the heel without losing my breath. What used to take seconds now feels like a full routine. A breath, a reach, a wince, a pause, and a prayer that I won't fall forward trying to tug the heel over my ankle. I think sometimes about how the smallest tasks become mountains. No one tells you that. No one warns you that one day socks will break your heart. I remember a winter when I used to tuck little feet into boots, wrap scarves, zip jackets, double knot laces while telling them to stand still. I had no coat myself half the time, just a sweater because they needed more. I didn't think of it as sacrifice. It was just instinct. I gave, and gave, and gave. And now, no one tucks me in. No one offers to help me dress. I wobble trying to get one leg in at a time, gripping furniture for balance, sweating under the weight of something that used to be simple. Last week, I fell in the bathroom. No one knows that. I didn't tell anyone. Not because I wasn't scared I was, but because I didn't want the conversation. The pity. The suggestions of assisted living. The unspoken fear in their eyes. I lay there for maybe 2 minutes. Maybe 10. Time stretches strangely when you're on the floor staring at tile grout. I eventually rolled, pushed, groaned my way up, shaking, but whole. And then I cleaned the floor. Because somehow that felt like reclaiming something control, maybe. Or dignity. Afterward, I sat on the bed with one sock still off, looking at my foot, like it belonged to someone else. It's a strange kind of grief. This slow betrayal. You don't mourn all at once. It comes in small, sharp stings, when you can't open a jar, when you forget a word, when socks become an ordeal. You start to live a double life, one foot in the memory of who you were, one planted shakily in who you are now. I see women my age in advertisements, silver-haired and spry, laughing on beaches, riding bicycles in slow motion. And I think, who are they fooling? Aging isn't romantic. It's not all wine and paintbrushes and linen shirts. It's falling in your own home and hoping your phone is close enough. It's bracing yourself before getting up from the toilet. It's staring at your feet and wondering how something so small became so far away. And yet, there's a kind of power in noticing. In naming the loss, in not pretending. I don't need to be graceful about it. I don't need to smile through it all. Some days I grieve. Some days I rage quietly inside. Most days I just endure. But in that endurance I've found something I never expected, a quieter kind of strength. Not the kind that carries groceries or calms tantrums, but the kind that breathes through disappointment. That forgives a body that's doing its best, that learns to love what's left even when it aches. One morning I sat in the living room, socks finally on slippers, waiting, and I looked at my hands, older now, softer, bonier. These were the hands that dressed babies, that buttoned shirts for a husband now gone, that ironed uniforms, wiped tears, signed school slips, stirred soup, folded lives into place. And here they were, still working, still here, still mine. So I stood, slowly, carefully, one hand on the armrest, one breath at a time. And I walked not with grace, not with speed, but with presence. And that, I think, is enough for now. It doesn't happen all at once, this disappearing. You'd think there'd be some clear moment, a turning point where your reflection changes or your voice stops echoing in their lives. But no, it's slower than that, quieter, like mist settling in the corners of a house no one dusts anymore. That's how it began for me, not with abandonment, not with cruelty, but with forgetfulness, a soft, creeping neglect. They didn't mean to. That's what I tell myself. They didn't mean to stop seeing me. It started with plans I wasn't included in, a birthday dinner for someone else that I found out about through photos, a quick text after the event. It was last minute, then holidays that shrank. Calls that used to come weekly now arrive when there's a question, a favor, or a guilt that needs soothing. I answer them, of course. I always answer, but I hear it in their voices, the distance, the way they talk to me like a character in a book they once loved but haven't opened in years. Polite, rushed, a little confused by the plot. I don't think they notice how often I stay silent, how I don't tell them things anymore. I used to share everything, little aches, small joys, the way the lilacs bloomed early this year. Now I keep it in, because I've learned that they don't know what to do with it. They fumble, say, "Aw," or "That's nice," or fall silent in ways that tell me they're already somewhere else on a screen, in traffic, in a meeting I'll never be invited to. So I edit myself, trim my stories, offer only what they can carry, and sometimes I offer nothing at all. But I notice everything. I notice how they speak to each other in front of me, a flurry of inside jokes and references I no longer understand. I notice when they forget I've already told them something. I notice when they call me mom or ma, like a label, not a name. I notice when they talk over me at the table, as if I'm part of the furniture, present, but not necessary. It's the invisibility that hurts most. Not because I crave attention, I've had more than my share of being needed, but because being unseen makes you question whether you're still real. I once had a voice that mattered. I once said things that shaped their days. Now I can speak, and the room moves on without me. I say, "Be careful, it's hot," and no one flinches. I say, "That reminds me of," and someone interrupts. I say nothing, and nothing changes. Even my body has become invisible. When I walk into a room slowly, they don't adjust the pace. When I struggle to stand, no one offers a hand. They assume I'll manage. They don't see the wall I graze for support, the breath I take before rising. They're used to me being strong, and now they're used to me being silent. But inside I feel every inch of the fade. I feel the loneliness settle into my joints. I feel the sharpness of being overlooked, especially when I once gave up everything, to be seen to be the sun around which their worlds revolved. I was their center once, their source of comfort, the person they called from school with scraped knees or broken hearts. And now I'm the background, a soft shape at the edge of the photograph. There's no announcement when your value starts to shrink. No one tells you, "We don't need you like we used to." They just stop showing up. They stop asking. They stop looking. But I still see. I still remember. I remember every birthday I planned, every fever I stayed up through, every costume I sewed, every sandwich I cut into shapes, every note tucked into a lunchbox. I remember who I was to them, even if they don't. One night I sat in the quiet and whispered to myself, "I'm still here," just to hear it said aloud, just to feel the shape of the truth in my mouth. And I think maybe that's what we all want, not to be praised, not to be celebrated, but simply to be known, to be seen, to have someone pause and say, "I remember who you were. I see who you still are." Because I'm still someone, still a woman, still a mother, still flesh and memory and story. My hair is thinner, my voice softer, my bones more fragile, but I am still here. It's hard to pinpoint when it happened, but I remember the feeling, the shift. One day I was essential. The next I was optional. Not in words, they never said anything cruel, but in gestures, in the way plans were made without me, in the way decisions came wrapped in announcements rather than conversations. I wasn't asked. I was informed about holidays, about visits, about changes in their lives that once would have needed my blessing or at least my ear. I stopped being useful. At first it was subtle, a dish taken from my hands, a suggestion that I sit down instead of helping. "Don't worry, Mom, we've got it." It sounded kind. It even felt like care. But there's a difference between someone doing something for you and someone removing you from the doing. The first is love. The second is quiet replacement. I used to run the kitchen. That was my stage, my power. Every gathering, every birthday, every Sunday meal was built around me, stirring, seasoning, baking with memory in my hands. Now when I arrive, the table is already set. The food is store-bought. They don't ask for my recipes anymore. They say it's just easier this way. And I nod because I don't want to be a burden, because I'm learning how to swallow absence without choking. Even the little ones, my grandchildren, they come to me less. They go to their tablets, their parents, their cartoons. I used to be the lap. They scrambled into the voice that read bedtime stories, the hands that magically produced snacks and Band-Aids. Now I'm a chair in the corner, smiling, waving, watching from afar like some sweet, irrelevant decoration. It's hard to explain this kind of grief to anyone who hasn't lived it. You don't cry every day. You don't scream. It's not loud like the heartbreaks of youth. It's quiet erosion, a steady peeling away of layers, until you look in the mirror and ask, "Who am I to them now?" And when you're no longer useful, the silence that follows is deafening. No one calls for advice. No one leans on you when things go wrong. They lean on each other, or worse, strangers. Therapists, podcasts, blogs. They speak of healing and growth and self-care. And I sit here wondering how many wounds I bandaged without ever giving mine time to scab. How many times I held space for others while shrinking my own voice to make theirs louder. I gave them everything. Not out of obligation, but because that's what love looked like to me. Service, sacrifice, showing up even when I was tired, even when I was breaking inside. I thought they'd remember, not just the gestures, but the woman behind them. The woman who made sure their shirts were ironed, who drove in the snow for school pickup, who worked late and woke early and kept everyone fed with more than just food. Now I watch them live lives I helped build, and I'm not in the blueprint anymore. I am the porch light left on just in case. But no one is coming up the steps. I don't think they mean to be unkind. I truly don't. I think they're just full of their own noise, their own schedules, their own children. They forget that I'm still here, still needing a kind word, still hoping for a question that isn't asked out of duty, but out of true wanting. "How are you really?" I haven't heard that in years. I try not to resent them. Most days I succeed. But there are moments like when I sit alone with a cup of tea I used to share with someone. When the bitterness tries to climb my throat, I swallow it down. I remind myself of grace, but it doesn't mean the ache isn't real. I tried once to say something, just a small thing. I said I miss cooking for everyone. It came out quiet, shy, even. And my daughter-in-law said, "Oh, but you don't need to anymore." "Isn't it nice to rest?" I smiled. I nodded. But inside I wanted to scream, rest from what? If no one lets me move. Being useful wasn't a burden, it was how I loved. And now, with that taken from me, I float through rooms like steam from a cooling kettle, there but fading. The phone rings less now, and when it does, the calls are short, efficient. Sometimes filled with warmth, yes, but it's a distant warmth, like heat from a sun behind glass, not the kind you feel on your skin. They ask, "How are you?" And before I can answer, there's a baby crying in the background, or a microwave beeping, or a rushed, "I'll call you back," and then they don't. But I still call. I call every week, sometimes more than once. I plan what I'll say in advance, thinking maybe this time the conversation will stretch. Maybe they'll ask something back. Maybe they'll want to stay on the line a little longer. I dial and listen to the rings, each one heavier than the last. And when it goes to voicemail, I leave a message. Cheerful, short, just checking in. Hope you're well. Love you. I always say love you even when I feel unsure whether they want to hear it. The truth is I talk less now because silence answers me more often than voices do. There are gaps, long open gaps between conversations where I sit at the kitchen table, phone nearby just in case. And sometimes I reach for it to make sure it's still working, that it didn't miss a call, that I didn't accidentally put it on silent. Because it's easier to believe in a technical error than to believe they didn't think to call. I remember when my phone was full of noise texts, reminders, photos being sent back and forth, questions about dinner or laundry or life's little puzzles. Mom, what do I do if the baby has a fever? How long do I cook the turkey? Can I come over? And now I scroll back through old messages just to see their names. Sometimes when they do call, they talk the whole time about their work, their stress, their schedules. I listen. I always listen. But when I speak, when I start to tell a story or confess something small like a strange pain in my side or a dream I had, there's a silence. Not the kind that waits, the kind that prepares to exit. You can feel it, the shift. They're no longer with you. Their mind is already leaving the room. And it's in that moment I realize I'm not the one they come to anymore. I'm the one they politely check on. One day I tried not calling, just to see, to test the air, to find out if anyone would notice the absence. A week went by, then 2, then 3. Nothing. Not a missed call, not a message, not even a forwarded photo or link. It's a strange thing to disappear slowly, to fade from the fabric of someone's daily life without any noise, without anyone tugging at the thread to see where you've gone. That 3rd week, I cried while folding towels, not because I was angry, though I think a small part of me was, but because I felt like I had become background noise in lives I once orchestrated. I sang their lullabies. I stitched their costumes. I was the first voice they heard when they were born, and now I'm the voice they skip when time is tight. I want to believe it's not intentional, that they love me still just differently, that their silence isn't rejection but exhaustion. But some days that belief wears thin. Some days I think of all the calls I answered at midnight, all the rides I gave, all the times I listened through tears and tantrums. And now that I need nothing but a conversation, now that all I have left to give is my voice, no one is reaching back. I keep calling, not because I expect anything grand, but because it's the only way I know to say I'm still here. I haven't gone anywhere. I'm still trying, even when it's hard, even when the silence that follows is louder than anything they could say. And when they do pick up, when they ask how I've been, I tell them I'm fine. I say it gently with a smile in my voice, like I don't mind the silence. But inside I'm screaming, not for help, not for pity, but for presence, for someone to care enough to ask again. But really, how are you? Because I'm not fine. I'm just quiet. and quiet women are easy to forget. There's a basket in the laundry room filled with tiny clothes that no longer fit anyone. Baby onesies, mismatched socks, a little sweatshirt with a rocket ship stitched on the front. I kept them, not because I thought I'd need them again, but because I couldn't let go of the years they held. I used to wash and fold those clothes every week, sometimes every day, turning piles of chaos into tidy little stacks, warm and clean and ready. It wasn't just laundry, it was care. It was love softened and scented with fabric sheets. And even now, even though no one asks me to, I still find myself folding things that aren't mine. Last month, my daughter and her family visited, just for a night. It wasn't planned. They arrived late, dropped their bags in the hallway, and by morning they were already packing to leave. I didn't complain. I was happy just to hear footsteps in the house again. Happy for the sound of someone else brushing their teeth down the hall. But what stayed with me wasn't their laughter or the way my granddaughter kissed my cheek goodbye. It was the pile of laundry they left behind. 3 towels, 2 little shirts, a pair of leggings with grass stains on the knees. I found them tucked in the hamper after they'd gone forgotten, and something inside me lit up. I stood in front of the washing machine with my hand on the lid for longer than necessary. The house was silent again, empty, but I felt full just for a moment, because I had something of theirs, something they needed, something I could do. I washed the clothes slowly, each piece like a prayer. I scrubbed the stains gently as if I could erase time itself, and when I folded them, I smoothed every wrinkle. I imagined their little bodies in them, imagined their morning routines, imagined her brushing her hair while putting on that same blue shirt. It made me feel part of their world again, not just an observer, but a quiet participant. I placed the clean pile on the hallway table even though no one would return soon to collect it. And then I just stared at it. I wanted to take a picture, to prove to someone, to myself, that I still mattered in the small ways, that I could still be of use, that my hands still held purpose. They never asked about the clothes. No one texted to say, "Did we leave something?" Weeks passed, and I eventually folded the pile into a plastic bag and stored it with the rest of the memories I'm not ready to part with. But I kept one little sock, the smallest one. I keep it in my drawer now, not because it will ever be worn again, but because it reminds me of a time when I was central to everything. I've noticed that I still do this search for ways to stay connected to serve. When they visit, I find myself wiping counters already clean, replacing hand towels that don't need replacing, refilling the soap dispenser, tidying their shoes by the door, slipping folded bills into their coat pockets just in case. They don't notice, or if they do, they don't say anything. But I don't do it for thanks. I do it because it makes me feel real. That's what people don't understand about mothers, especially aging mothers. We don't stop loving with action just because no one asks anymore. Love doesn't retire. It simply finds quieter corners to bloom in, like folded laundry, like soup left in the fridge with a note, like socks saved in drawers and stories saved in hearts. Sometimes I wish I could tell them how much those little acts still mean to me, how I wake up and plan small tasks just to keep from drifting, how folding their clothes, even when they've long outgrown them, gives me something to hold on to in this slow, hollowing season. But I don't, because to them it's just a chore, just another thing I do without being asked. But to me, it's memory, it's meaning, it's motherhood in its most distilled form, loving even after the need is gone, giving even when there's no request, folding shirts that will never be worn again, simply because your hands still remember how. There's a chair by the window where I sit most mornings. It's nothing fancy, an old thing with worn arms and a cushion that's gone soft in the center, but it holds me. And in a world where so much slips through my fingers, being held by anything, even a chair, feels like mercy. From that spot, I can see the street, a little bend in the sidewalk, a tree that loses its leaves too early every fall, and the neighbor's front porch, where their wind chimes sing even when there's no breeze. I used to pass by this window on my way to something, always on my way, rushing to the kitchen, rushing out the door, rushing back in again. Now I stop. Now I sit. I watch people move, the young man who jogs every morning, the mother who walks her daughter to school, the delivery truck that always parks a little too close to the mailbox. Their lives hum along out there, just as mine once did. But mine has grown still, slower, tucked in like the folded blankets in the basket beside me. There's a rhythm to watching the world from the inside. At first I resented it, the stillness, the being passed by. I missed the feeling of going somewhere, of mattering enough to be needed at a destination. But then the rhythm changed me. I began to notice things I never did when I was rushing, the way the morning sun warms the left side of the tree before the right, how the birds gather on the power line, like little notes on a musical staff, how a single leaf can twist in the breeze for minutes before deciding to fall. Still watching isn't the same as living. I used to walk that very sidewalk, my hands full of groceries, or a child's backpack, or just swinging with energy I didn't know would one day run out. Now even a few steps outside feels like preparing for a journey. I hold on to the doorway for balance. I pause to check the weather, not because I care if it's sunny, but because my knees will. One day I sat in the chair and tried to remember the last time someone asked me to go somewhere. Really asked, not out of obligation, but with excitement. I couldn't. It had been too long. Invitations now come with disclaimers, only if you're up for it. It might be a bit too much for you. Don't worry, we'll take pictures. And sometimes they don't come at all. I tell them I don't mind. I'm happy just to hear about it, I say. But what I mean is I wish I was still in the story, not just a listener, but a participant. The chair by the window doesn't judge. It holds me with the same patience every day, whether I am smiling, weeping, or just quiet. And in that way, it has become a kind of companion, a witness to my slow fading, but also, oddly, to my slow awakening. Because while the world has forgotten me in some ways, I have started remembering myself. Sitting here day after day, I've uncovered thoughts I buried under years of service. I've traced the contours of my solitude and found hidden within it pieces of myself that motherhood and marriage had long swallowed. I think sometimes about how many years I lived for others, how many days were shaped around someone else's hunger, someone else's schedule, someone else's dreams. And now, with no demands left on me, I wonder what were mine. What did I love before I was needed? I used to sketch, long ago, before diapers and dishes and deadlines. I found an old notebook the other day with my name in the corner, dated 1972. The pages were yellowed, the pencil lines faded, but my hand was there, sure, expressive, curious. I brought it to the chair and turned the pages slowly, like tracing a life that almost was. I haven't drawn in decades. My fingers are stiffer now. My eyes blur more quickly, but that old notebook awakened something. The next morning I brought a pencil and a fresh pad to the window. I drew the tree. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even very good. But it was mine. A line, a shape, a quiet reclaiming. And as I sketched, I heard the chimes across the street. I watched the girl on her way to school. I saw the sun catch the edge of a cloud in a way that made it glow like a promise. And for the first time in a long while, I felt not young, not busy, but alive. The chair held me, the world moved outside, and I drew a line that said, I'm still here. The first time my legs betrayed me, I was standing at the sink, washing a plate of all things, something I'd done thousands of times, before hot water sponge a rhythm, as familiar as breathing. And then, in an instant, my right knee buckled, not dramatically, not like in the movies where someone cries out and crashes to the floor. It was smaller than that, quieter, like a gentle collapse, like my body simply decided it was done supporting me without warning or apology. I gripped the counter hard, racing the plate slipping slightly in my hand. I didn't fall. I caught myself, but that moment cracked something inside me, not just in my knee, but in the belief I had always held that my body would listen to me, that I was still in charge. I stood there for a long time, pretending I was just letting the water run, but really I was listening to my breath, to my fear, to the sudden understanding that this was the beginning of something I couldn't stop. A new chapter and I hadn't agreed to. A betrayal, not from someone else, but from within. That night, I didn't say anything. When the phone rang and one of the kids asked, "How are you?" I smiled and said, Good, just finished cleaning up the kitchen." It wasn't a lie, not entirely, but I didn't tell them how I clung to the counter, how I stood there trembling, how I walked to the chair, with a strange new caution in my steps. Since then, the betrayals have grown bolder, a stumble here, a missed stare there. I find myself sitting down more often, not out of laziness, but out of necessity. I test each surface before I commit my weight to it. I scan a room for something to hold before I stand. It's like walking through life in a body that's slowly erasing the blueprint I've always known. And still no one sees it. Or maybe they choose not to. When I visit, they say things like, "You look great, Mom," or "You're so strong for your age." I nod. I thank them. But inside, I want to scream, "You have no idea what it took to get here, to climb the stairs to your apartment, to smile through the fire in my joints." One afternoon, I fell in the garden. The hose had curled into a little snake near the rose bushes, and my foot caught just enough to throw me off. I landed on the soft earth knees, muddy elbow scratched. I lay there for a few seconds looking up at the sky. The clouds were moving slowly, peacefully, like nothing had changed. And I thought, maybe I'll just stay here, just for a while, just until someone notices. But no one came. And eventually I got up, slowly, carefully. I brushed off the dirt, wiped the blood with a tissue from my sleeve, and went inside. I didn't tell anyone, because what would they do? Worry, pity me, suggest a walker, a home, a different life. That's the part no one talks about, the fear of being managed. The moment they see weakness, it becomes a conversation, a plan, a future you didn't choose. So I stay silent. I fall quietly. I rise quietly. I survive in silence. But inside I grieve, not just the pain, not just the inconvenience, but the loss of trust. I used to trust my legs. I used to walk in high heels across icy sidewalks. I used to dance in kitchens, run through parking lots, chase after children in parks. And now I grip handrails and avoid wet tiles and pray under my breath that the elevator works. And yet the betrayal isn't total. My legs still carry me haltingly, awkwardly, but faithfully. They haven't given up. They're just tired, like the rest of me. They whisper now instead of shouting. They ask for care, for patience, for grace. Sometimes I place my hand on one knee and say, "I forgive you." Not because I'm okay with what's happening, but because anger takes energy I don't have. I'd rather spend that energy walking to the window, or picking up a book, or simply standing when I still can. Because even in betrayal, there's a strange kind of loyalty. My body may not be what it was, but it's still mine, still carrying me through each day, still trying. And maybe that's enough. They tell me I'm strong. They mean it as a compliment, I suppose, maybe even as comfort. But every time I hear those words, something inside me tightens. You're so strong. It used to make me feel proud. Now it feels like a dismissal dressed up in praise. Strong means I don't need help. Strong means I can bear anything without breaking. Strong means they can keep walking past my pain because they assume I've got it handled. And for most of my life I did. I carried 100 invisible weights every day and never once let them see me wobble. That's what mothers do, right? We hold it all together, the schedules, the meals, the fears, the dreams. We become the spine of the home, the clock, the calendar, the cushion. But what no one tells you is what happens when the spine starts to bend, when the strength starts to fray, when the woman who held everyone else up begins to need a hand herself. They don't know what to do with that version of you, the one who pauses before standing, who needs to grip the table, who forgets what day it is sometimes. So they say, "You're strong," and move on, as if that absolves them from seeing what's really happening. A few weeks ago, I had a dizzy spell in the middle of a conversation. I was sitting at the dining table listening to my daughter describe a work meeting when the room shifted, just slightly like a boat tilting in slow motion. I steadied my breath, gripped the edge of the table, smiled and nodded as if I hadn't just floated away for a second. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did, and chose not to ask. After all, I'm strong. But I don't want to be strong all the time. I want to be soft. I want to be asked how I'm doing and not have to say fine. I want someone to look past the smile I've practiced like armor and say, "Tell me the truth. I can handle it." Because the truth is, I'm tired. Not just in my body, but in my spirit. Tired of holding space for everyone else and having no space held for me. Tired of being the one who remembers birthdays, who sends texts just to check in, who still thinks to ask about the little things that matter, and receiving silence in return. Once after a family dinner, I stood alone in the kitchen cleaning up while they laughed in the next room. My knees ached, my feet throbbed, and my hands were wet and wrinkled. I paused, dish in hand, and listened to their voices full of joy and light, like they belonged to a world I used to be part of. No one offered to help. No one even noticed I was gone. They'd eaten the food I made, sat at the table I set, but forgot the woman behind the curtain. They would say, "But you always want to do it." And that was true, once, because doing was my love language, my offering, my way of saying I see you, I care. But now I want to be seen too. I don't need medals or speeches. I just want a moment of honesty. A warm cup of tea placed in my hand without asking. A soft, "You sit." I've got this, not out of pity, not out of duty, but because someone finally realized that the strong ones need tending too. But I won't ask, not directly. I don't know how. The habits of silence are stitched into me like old embroidery, beautiful, delicate, and too tight to unpick. So I wait, I hope. I drop small hints that drift past them like smoke. And when they don't catch on, I smile and keep going. Because that's what I've always done. Strong. They say it like it's a crown, but some days it feels more like a muzzle. And yet in the quiet I find a kind of truth. I am strong, not in the way they mean, not invincible, not unshakable, but in the way that endures, in the way that notices beauty even in loneliness, in the way that gets back up after the legs give out, that stitches love into silence, that folds sorrow into softness. So yes, I am strong, but I am also human, and I am waiting for the day they see both. I asked for help once. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't fall or cry or bleed. I simply couldn't lift the box. It was heavier than it looked, filled with old books I had meant to donate years ago, their spines cracked and stories worn from use. I was trying to tidy the guest room, trying to make space, trying to stay useful. But the moment I bent down and wrapped my arms around the box, something inside me said no. My wrists trembled, my breath caught, and for once I let myself stop pretending. I called my son, just a quick call, nothing heavy, nothing emotional. When you're free, could you swing by? I need a little help with something. There was a pause, short, but full. Then sure, maybe, sometime next week. What's up? I could hear the distraction in his voice, a keyboard tapping, a child's voice in the background. He wasn't unkind, just distant, detached. I explained about the box, about the room. I made it sound small, easy, nothing urgent. He never came. Next week became the week after. Then a month passed, then another. The box stayed right where I left it on the floor beside the bed, half full of forgotten pages, half full of disappointment. Every time I walked past it, I had to step around it. And every time something in me stepped around the truth too, I had asked. And I had been left waiting. It wasn't just about the box. It was what it represented that I had finally allowed myself to need. To admit weakness. To open the door to someone else's help. And what came through that door was silence. After a while, I moved the books myself, not all at once, one at a time, over days. I shuffled slowly, stacking them in small, manageable piles, catching my breath after each trip to the hallway. I didn't tell anyone, and I didn't get hurt, but I think something inside me shifted that week. Not physically, emotionally. I stopped asking. Because what people don't understand is that asking isn't easy, especially for someone like me, someone who's been the giver for so long, someone who's worn independence like armor, like gospel. When you finally gather the courage to ask and are met with delay, indifference, or forgetfulness, it doesn't just sting. It confirms a fear you've carried for years. I'm not a priority anymore. Since then, I've noticed how rare it is for anyone to offer help without being prompted. And when they do, it's often surface level. Need anything said? On the way out the door. Let me know if I can do something shouted over a shoulder. Words like confetti, pretty but weightless. No one sees the effort it takes to do the small things now. How I steady myself before picking up a dropped spoon. How I plan my day around the good hours of my joints. How I measure every movement like a budget. What can I afford to spend today, and what pain will come tomorrow? I've started to pretend again. When they visit, I tidy the house in advance, even if it takes me days. I bake something simple, something that makes the place smell like it used to. I smile when they say, "You're amazing still doing all this." And I nod, because I'd rather be exhausted than pitied. But sometimes in the quiet of the evening, when my back is sore and the lights are low, I whisper, "I wish someone would just notice." Not because I want to be rescued, but because I want to be seen. I want someone to put a hand on my shoulder and say, "You shouldn't have to do this alone." I don't think they mean to overlook me. I truly believe they love me. But love isn't just in the big gestures. It's in showing up. It's in remembering the small asks. It's in hearing the difference between I'm fine and I'm tired, but pretending. I asked for help once, and I'm still recovering not from the effort, but from the silence that answered me. There's a mirror in the hallway I used to walk past without a second thought. It hangs beside the coat rack just above the little table where we used to toss our keys and mail back when the house pulsed with movement. For years it reflected the blur of busy days, bags slung over shoulders, hair brushed in a rush, lips pursed, as I checked my face one last time before heading out. Now the mirror is still, and so am I. I caught my reflection there a few mornings ago, not on purpose. I was reaching for the light switch when I looked up, and there she was, the woman in the mirror. Hair thinner, skin paler, eyes darker at the edges. I froze, not out of vanity, but out of unfamiliarity. I studied the lines around my mouth, the softness under my chin, the way my shoulders curved inward, like someone folding in on herself. I knew it was me, but it felt like looking at someone I used to know. For a long time, I avoided mirrors. I didn't realize I was doing it until that morning. I'd glance without truly looking, a quick check to see if my sweater was buttoned or if my collar sat right, but never long enough to confront the truth. Never long enough to see the slow erosion of youth, the quiet rebellion of time. But there, standing in that cold patch of hallway light, I let myself look. And I whispered, "So this is who you became." I don't mean that in sorrow, or not only in sorrow. There's something else too, something like reverence, because every line has a story. Every shadow under my eyes has a reason. These aren't just signs of age. They're evidence of years spent awake with sick children, of tears cried behind closed bathroom doors, of laughter that wrinkled the corners of my face because I never learned how to laugh gently. Still, there's a quiet ache that comes with recognition. I miss the woman I used to be, not because she was prettier, but because she was seen. She belonged to the world. People looked at her, spoke to her with curiosity. Doors opened for her. Salespeople called her Miss. She had a presence that carried weight in rooms. And now I walk into stores and get overlooked. I speak and sometimes feel the words drift past ears already tuned elsewhere. Aging is a strange unraveling. It isn't just about the body. It's about visibility, about mattering, about being counted. And when the world begins to walk past you without pause, you start to wonder, am I still here, or just a shadow of who I was? I try to reclaim pieces of myself. I wear lipstick sometimes, even if no one will see it. I brush my hair and spritz perfume before sitting down to drink tea alone. Not because I'm clinging to vanity, but because those little rituals used to mean something. They told the world I was a woman with a life. And now they tell me I still am, even if the world forgets. One afternoon, I tried on a dress I hadn't worn in years. It was too tight. I laughed quietly as I struggled with the zipper, then stood in front of the mirror and remembered the last time I wore it, a wedding full of music and dancing. I remembered how I'd twirled, how the fabric had moved like water, how I'd felt beautiful, not because anyone told me so, but because I believed it. I didn't keep the dress on for long. I folded it gently, wrapped it in tissue, and placed it back in the drawer. But something in me felt taller that day, more visible, as if I'd reminded myself of something important, that I haven't disappeared. I've just changed form. Now when I pass the mirror, I look. Not every day, not for long, but I look. And sometimes I speak. I say, "You're still here." I say you made it. I say I see you. Because maybe that's what we all need, not someone else's recognition, but our own. To gaze into our own eyes and say, "You are still worthy," even now, especially now. I still remember my own name. It sounds like a simple thing, but it isn't. Not when you've been mom or grandma or honey or ma'am for so many years that your birth name starts to sound foreign. People forget that women like me once had full identities, rich and complicated, long before we were ever called someone's anything. My name, spoken only on legal forms or by old friends I rarely hear from, still lives inside me, waiting quietly to be said again. I hear it sometimes in my own mind, whispered, like a song I used to love but haven't played in a while. It brings back a different version of me. A girl who walked fast with long legs and big dreams, who stayed out too late, who danced in kitchens barefoot. Before marriage, before children, before the heavy cloak of sacrifice stitched itself across my shoulders. My children don't call me by my name, of course. Why would they? I was never encouraged to keep it at the forefront. The moment I became a mother, I became theirs, and I wore that role like armor. I didn't protest when my name faded from use. I thought that was what love looked like, becoming invisible for the sake of someone else's growth. But as I've aged, something strange has happened. The world sees me less and I see myself more. The silence of this stage of life has become a kind of mirror, and when I look into it, I don't just see a mother or a grandmother or an old woman shuffling carefully across the floor. I see her, the girl with my name. I wish I could tell my children who I still am, not the caretaker, not the scheduler or peacemaker, but the woman with stories they've never heard, the woman who once stood on a rooftop at midnight just to feel the city hum beneath her feet, the woman who used to write poetry in the margins of her school notebooks, the woman who for one brief summer thought about moving far away and starting a new life just because she could. That version of me didn't die when they were born. She just stepped aside, quietly, willingly, but she never stopped existing. And she remembers. She remembers how she used to be afraid of getting older, not because of wrinkles or gray hair, but because she feared becoming irrelevant. She remembers wondering what kind of woman she would be at 60, 70, 80, and now she knows. She's someone who carries the weight of being forgotten with more grace than bitterness, someone who makes tea for one and still sets it down on a coaster, someone who speaks less but thinks more, who aches but endures. Some days when I hear someone on the television or the radio with my name, I pause. I let it echo through the room like a bell, tolling in the distance. I whisper it back, not for anyone else, just for me, to feel it on my tongue again, to remind myself that underneath the titles, beneath the roles, there is still a person with a whole history. And sometimes when I'm alone and brave enough, I write it down, in the corners of notebooks, on the back of grocery lists, my name, my full name, the one I chose to give away so many times to family, to marriage, to motherhood, but that still belongs to me. It's a kind of quiet rebellion, I think, this act of remembering myself, not loudly, not with drama, but with tenderness, with care, because no one else will do it if I don't. They don't mean harm. They just never saw me outside of who I was to them. But I see me, and I am not just someone's mother. I am not just someone's past. I am a woman, a story, a soul still unfolding. And even if the world forgets, even if my name is never spoken again by those I love, I will whisper it back to myself, every day if I must, because I remember who I am, and that is enough. The day I let go of the wall was a small one. There was no music playing, no one clapped or watched. It wasn't a dramatic victory. It was a Tuesday, I think, the kind of day that passes without notice. I had just finished folding towels, not because they needed folding, but because it gave me something to do with my hands. I stood there in the hallway, staring at the short distance to the kitchen, 10 steps maybe, a distance I had walked thousands of times. Normally I'd brush the tips of my fingers against the wall as I went, not gripping, not leaning, just touching. a little insurance, a little comfort. It had become second nature. The wall was my silent witness, my anchor. And on that day, for some reason, I pulled my hand back. It wasn't a bold decision. It was a whisper. Something in me said, just try. Just for these 10 steps. Just for now. So I stood taller. I pressed my shoulders back, even though they protested. And I walked. The floor didn't shift beneath me. My legs didn't tremble. I moved slowly, deliberately. But I moved without the wall. And when I reached the kitchen, I placed my hand on the countertop. Not because I had to, but because I had arrived. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just stood there breathing. It was such a small moment, insignificant maybe to anyone else. But for me, it was a reclaiming. Because somewhere along the way, I had become smaller than I remembered. I had shrunk beneath the weight of time and silence and invisibility. I had learned to disappear gently, to apologize for needing space, for taking up time, for aging. But in that moment, those 10 steps, I felt my size return. Not in body, but in self. I don't always walk without the wall now. Some days I still need it. But on that Tuesday, I reminded myself that I am not only my weakness. I am not just the sag in my spine or the soreness in my knees. I am still capable of movement, of decision, of choosing when to hold on and when to let go. Letting go of the wall didn't make me young again. It didn't erase the years or the loneliness, but it made space for something else, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Dignity. Not the loud kind, not the prideful kind, the quiet kind. The kind that says, even now I still get to choose how I move through this world. I spent so many years living for others, measuring my worth by what I could do, how fast I could serve, how much I could carry. And when that strength faded, I thought I had disappeared. But I see now I was only learning a new kind of strength, the kind that comes not from muscles, but from the refusal to vanish completely. Letting go of the wall was not a denial of my pain. It was an agreement with myself. I am still here, even if the calls don't come, even if the children forget, even if my name goes unspoken. I am still a woman with steps to take, even if they're slow. That night I made tea and sat by the window. The wind moved the branches outside. A bird landed on the railing. Life, unbothered, continued around me. But inside something had changed. Not loudly, not all at once, but quietly, like a ripple in a pond after a stone finally finds the surface. I let go of the wall, and I stood on my own.